Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I want to talk about masculine and feminine power dynamics in the Quran based on what is normally called the Queen of Sheba and the story of the Prophet Solomon or Sulaiman. And the reason I said normally called the Queen of Sheba, and even in Arabic a lot of times we say Malikatu Saba, is because the Quran doesn't call her that. And I think it's a mistake to call her that, and I think that misses one of the biggest wisdoms of the story. So if we go to chapter 27, Surah 27, Surah An-Naml, where this story is told, we find this description in verse 23, 27, 23. Inni wajadtu mra'atan tamlikuhum. It says that I found a woman tamlikuhum. Now it uses the term tamlikuhum. It doesn't use the term melika. He didn't say I found a queen. He said, I found a woman, tamlikuhum. Okay? Now, tamlikuhum, interestingly, is the same word that is the root word for the word melika, queen. So why can't we call her a queen then? And what does the word tamlikuhum mean? Let's talk about that for a second. First of all, tamliku is the word and hum is them. So tamlikuhum. So tamliku is a present tense continuous verb, meaning it's talking about an action that's occurring continuously and presently in the time period of the speaker, tamlikuhum, and basically means she is controlling them. Okay? Now, what's the difference between saying that and calling her melika, calling her a queen? And why can't we just, because it's the same root word, melika, mim lam kaf, tamliku, mim lam kaf, is the same root word, right? Why can't we interchange them? Well, first of all, a principle in studying the Quran is no two words are interchangeable, even if they come from the same root. So if one word is used in a particular way, we want to respect how that word is used, and we want to think about why that word is used like that. Every word has a meaning in the place that it's used in the Quran. Not only that, but every form of every word has a meaning in the place that it's used in the Quran. So we want to respect that. So that's number one. Number two, there's a difference between, when we study Arabic, there's a difference between a noun and a verb, even if it comes from the same root. And I think this is where we really get into the feeling of the masculine and feminine power dynamics in this story in the Quran. And if we just interchange them, if we just make this a noun and call her a queen, Malika, instead of using the verb that the Quran uses, tamliku, I think we miss something very deep here. So what is the difference between a verb and a noun? So a verb is an action word. Okay, so a verb indicates an action that comes about connected to a time period, right? So there's these two elements with the verb, right? And you could add in the element of the doer of the action, but that's a whole different discussion. But right now we're looking at the time period with the verb. So it's an action that comes about at a particular time. So with a past tense verb, it's an action that comes about in the past. Present tense verb, it's an action that is ongoing in the present. Future tense verb, it's an action that will occur in the future. An order form verb is seeking for an action to occur, but it always has to do with the action connected to a particular time. So the thing about that is, it indicates, as they say in the study of Arabic, it indicates huduth, meaning it indicates something that comes about in particular time periods, meaning it's not a consistent quality. It comes about connected with a time period. Now, a noun indicates a consistent quality. So when you describe something as a noun in Arabic, that means that's a consistent quality of that thing. So let me give you a different example outside of the one that we're talking about, and then we'll apply that back to this one. So a different example is if I said someone is a katib, he's a writer, versus if I say huwa yaktub, he is writing. So if I say huwa yaktub, he is writing, that means he's writing now continuously in the present tense, or he will write at some point in the future. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the quality of writing is a consistent, regular quality of that person. But if I say huwa katib, he is a writer, as a noun, that means that's a consistent quality of that person, whether or not he's writing at this current moment. He may not be writing at all at this current moment, but that is a consistent quality of him. So now if we go to this verse uses a present tense verb to describe her leadership. Okay? Inni wajadtu imra'atan tamlikuhum. He said, I found a woman, tamlikuhum, who was controlling them with a present tense verb, and didn't call her a melika, didn't call her a queen as a noun. So the first thing that I would take away from that is that the idea of being a queen as a consistent quality of her identity was not present, meaning that wasn't a part of her consistent identity. It was something she's doing as an action, as a role that she's fulfilling, but it's not part of her identity. SubhanAllah. Let's stop and think about that. Could that possibly indicate the difference between masculine and feminine power dynamics? Meaning, we as men, we want power, we want force, we want these different things. If something happens that makes us feel weak, that affects our identity. So the idea of strength and power and force is a consistent quality of our identity. Whereas from a feminine perspective, they're more collaborative, they're more consulting with other people, trying to bring other people in, make people feel welcome. They're not as much seeking power and force and for that rulership to become a part of their identity, even if they're in a leadership position where they have to exert the control and leadership, but it's just an action they're doing. It's not something they're internalizing as a part of their identity. SubhanAllah, that's deep. Because then from there, we can learn from that. We can learn as men to change the way that we think about leadership and power and authority, and to not think that being a leader has to become a part of our identity, where if something happens and we don't have power or we can't exert our force on someone else, now all of a sudden we feel weak or we feel less than a man. So we can learn something from the feminine power dynamic that we find in this surah. And just to support this theory about why the Qur'an describes her as tamlikuhum, ruling or controlling them, let's bring a couple other examples. If we look at chapter 5, verse 25, this will prove that not every time you use the present tense verb tamliku or yamliku or amliku to mean she is controlling or he is controlling or I am controlling, that automatically translates into that person being a melik, a king, or a melika, a queen. Okay? Chapter 5, verse 25 speaks about Moses, when he spoke about him and his brother Aaron or Harun, when he said, Inni la amliku illa nafsi wa akhi. He said, I do not control, but he used the same word, amliku. I do not control except for myself and my brother. Okay? So now when he used the word amliku, control, and said, I don't control except for myself and my brother, we wouldn't interpret that to say Musa is Meliku Harun. He's the king of Harun. Right? So in the same way, when we read this surah where she is described as tamlikuhum, controlling them, we shouldn't automatically translate that to she was their melika, she was their queen. Right? She was someone who was in authority, leadership, responsibility, but she took a different outlook in the way that she did it. Okay? To further support this, if we read further down, that's 27 and 23. So if we go down to how she dealt with the letter of Sulaiman, because Sulaiman sent her a letter. How did she deal with the letter of Sulaiman? So Sulaiman sent the letter, and she said, Innahu min Sulaiman wa innahu bismillahir rahmanir rahim. She said, it is from Sulaiman, and it is in the name of Allah, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And then she gave the components of the letter, the contents of the letter. Allah ta'alu alayya wa'tuni muslimin. Do not exalt yourselves over me and come to me in submission. Now, how did she deal with that? Did she automatically respond like as a man would tend to? Like if we're challenged as a man and, like that, like come to me and don't exalt yourself. As a man, my response is I want to be like, who are you talking to? Right? She didn't do that. What did she do? She said, or the Quran narrates what she said. قالت, she said, Ya ayyuhal mala'u aftuni fi amri. She turned to her council and she said, oh, my council, give me a verdict about this affair of mine. ما كنت قاطعة أمرا حتى تشهدون. I don't firmly decide a matter until you give me witness. So see, the feminine power dynamic in leadership is collaborative. Us as men, a lot of times it's about territory and possession and force, right? We want to be the top dog, the alpha male, as they say, right? But the feminine power dynamic is collaborative, getting everybody together and asking them, what do you guys think? What do you guys think we should do? Right? And in doing that, when you do that, and see, that's how Allah describes the believers in other parts of the Quran. He says, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. Their affair is mutual consultation amongst themselves. Right? So that's why I say this is the type of leadership that we want to learn from. And I want to make sure I make clear, we're not putting Sulaiman down, right? But these stories in the Quran are told to us to learn lessons from. Just like when Musa got angry and threw the tablets and grabbed his brother, if we discuss the benefits of that, of learning about that, and we say like, look, Musa got angry and this is what happens when you don't control your anger, we're not putting Musa down. We're just benefiting from the story that Allah told us about these beautiful people. So here she's collaborative. She makes shura. She consults them. And they gave her, their thoughts of what they thought. But then look at how she described what she knew would happen. And this again shows the difference in the power dynamics. Because someone could say, because I emphasize the difference between ruling or controlling, tamliku as a verb, and the word melik or melika as a king or a queen. So someone could say, is Sulaiman a melik, a king? I would say, Allah knows best, it seems by this next statement she said, because she described him with a noun. She said, قالت إن الملوك. She said, the kings, right? It's plural, but he's included because she's showing her understanding of what kings do as a noun. When someone is a king with a consistent quality of being a king in their identity, this is what they do. إذا دخلوا قرية أفسدوها. When they enter a town, they bring it down, basically. They ransack it. وَجَعَلُوا, they completely turn over the power dynamics because they're a king. It's all about power and force and control. وَجَعَلُوا أَعِزَّةَ أَهْلِهَا أَذِلَّةً. And they make the people in that town who were the most honorable people, they make them low. وَكَذَلِكَ يَفْعَلُونَ. And she said, and thus they do. So she understood the quality of being a king as a noun, as a part of your identity. So she in her discussion by the Quran relating this shows us the difference between the feminine power dynamic in leadership, the collaborative way, and the idea of power and leadership and force as a part of your mentality and identity, where your whole thought process is to turn things upside down. SubhanAllah, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And then to support this, look at the difference between what she did next and what Sulaiman did next. She says, وَإِنِّي مُرْسِلَةٌ إِلَيْهِمْ بِهَدِيَّةٍ فَنَاظِرَةٌ بِمَا يَرْجِعُ الْمُرْسَلُونَ. She said, I'm going to send a gift to him and wait and see what the messengers come back with. She's going to send him a gift. Like, when you think about that part of the story, man, it's almost kind of cute, right? Because she's tamlikuhum, she's collaborative. She's in a leadership role and she has responsibility, but it's not something that's a part of her identity. She's bringing people together. She wants to bring people together. She's asking them their advice. And then she's like, well, I know how kings do. They come in and they turn everything upside down. I'm going to send them a gift. I'm going to try to get along with them. So what happened? فَلَمَّا جَاءَ سُلَيْمَانَ. So when they came to Sulaiman, or so when it came to Sulaiman, قال أتمدونني بمال فما آتاني الله خير مما آتاكم. So when he came to Sulaiman, or it came to Sulaiman, he said, do you support me with wealth? What Allah has given me is better than what He has given you. بل أنتم بهديتكم تفرحون. Rather, you enjoy your gift. Like, he threw it back. Then he said, ارجع إليهم, go back to them, فلنأتينهم بجنود لا قبل لهم بها. We're going to come to them with soldiers that they have no resistance for. وَلَنُخْرِجَنَّهُمْ مِنْهَا أَذِلَّةً وَهُمْ صَاغِرُونَ. And we're going to expel them from their town in a humiliated state while they are lowly. So she wanted to maybe get along and collaborate and maybe soften Sulaiman's heart. But Sulaiman's response was, get that gift out of my face. We're going to come to you with armies. And so you see the difference in the feminine power dynamic and leadership versus the male power dynamic and leadership. And again, just like I said earlier, that's not a slight to Sulaiman, but I think we have to think deeply about these stories and the way that these stories are described in the Quran. They have many wisdoms and layers that are always unfolding, and I think we can learn from that. We can learn from her example how to take a different approach to leadership and not necessarily feel that as men or even as women we have to have that idea of leadership as an identity, as like a part of who we are, where we kind of get caught up on that in the egotistical kind of way, but rather we do it as a sense of responsibility, being collaborative and trying to bring people together. And Allah knows best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.